Happy Monday. We are here. We are here. We are here. And it's been a busy day. Well, actually, it hasn't been too bad today. It's been a little lighter today, which is good. I hope all is well. Hope you all had a great weekend. I know we have the holiday tomorrow. For those who, I think we have a holiday tomorrow, so enjoy your time off. I think there's a few holidays this week, if I'm not mistaken. So if you have time off coming up, kudos to you. That's exciting. I'm excited about our topic today, y'all, because I know I say that every week, but you know what I'm saying. I'm excited about our topic, which is not something that is talked about a lot. And when it is talked about, it's talked about in a way that usually isn't as helpful. So I'm hoping with how I'm talking about it today, that it's actually a little bit more helpful and gives you some tangible things to think about and to execute. But today we're talking about mental wellness barriers, basically the things that come up for us that prevent us in attempting to be well, attempting to do better. Those barriers, those things that stop us, those things that prevent us, right? So I'm going to talk about maybe some common and uncommon things that may show up for you in attempting to be well mentally, specifically mentally. Physical is a little bit in there, but this is primarily mentally. And I hope this is something that initiates awareness. This isn't a really heavy, you have to do these steps type of thing. This is more so of let's bring a higher level of awareness in this thing. And that's the beginning to healing. Hopefully my sound is okay. Because my phone's been acting a little weird today. Okay, so if this is your first time, my name is Debbie. I am a certified mindfulness coach as well as a therapist intern. This channel's all things mindful living. We talk about all different types of things. But today is a topic that was voted on in our poll. And actually there's polls on different social media platforms. So this was actually highly voted on the Facebook platform. So I know it didn't rank high on this platform, but it did rank high on the Facebook one. So everybody should be filtering in from the Facebook group. But yeah, so that's really what this is. We'll probably be another maybe 30-ish minutes when we're talk through everything, and I'll give you guys some guidance. There isn't a lot of affirmations tonight. This is more journal prompty at the end. But what I'm going to do is just kind of talk a little bit more about what wellness barriers, mental wellness barriers are. I'll talk about the factors and how those barriers may show up. And then I'll talk about, there's 6 barriers that I wanted to highlight. And they're more generalized. There's probably a lot of things that flood into all of these 6 areas, but wanted to make sure that I gave you some ones that you may not think about. And then we'll end with integration. Like, what is your first step? What should you do moving forward? Okay. Hi, is it Jane or Janet? Might be Janet. Hi, welcome in. Hi, Mariana. Is it Julius? Georgie Lewis? George? Maybe it's just George. Oh, George Lewis. Maybe it's middle name. Okay. Hi, Hiru. Welcome in. And hi, Alex. Hi, Mark. Welcome in. Thank you so much for joining. Okay, so we're going to dive in, but if you guys have any barriers that you can think of, feel free to drop them in the chat. Feel free to let me know where you're watching from. I would love to hear that. But if there's anything that comes up for you that you can think of the top of your mind, what is keeping you from being well? What is keeping you from, going through the process of wellness, specifically mentally? And then we're going to dive in here. Let me actually pull up here. Okay, so let's talk about just mental wellness barriers. So it's an internal and external obstacle that make it difficult for us to feel emotionally balanced, mentally clear, and spiritually grounded. Okay, so mental wellness barriers are internal and external obstacles that make it difficult for us to feel emotionally balanced, mentally clear, and spiritually grounded. Oftentimes, we feel stuck or stagnant in our mental wellness and don't know why or don't understand why. So, today is more so about bringing awareness to barriers that are not as obvious and that we may use as excuses to not strive to be well. Okay. The key word is excuses. A lot of times, the barriers are those excuses that we give to ourselves as to why we can't be well, why we can't do better, why we can't change our habits. The things that we tell ourselves are those small back of the mind voices that are there that tell us that we can't be well because of this, or this is getting in the way, right? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Now, just to think of where to start, the best place to start is to understand that mental wellness barriers are factors that interfere with the person's ability to maintain emotional stability, healthy thinking patterns, and effective daily functioning. So these areas can be psychological, environmental, social, cultural, spiritual, or physical. Okay? So just understanding that it's not going to always be something that's so surface. It may come from very internal emotional wounds and trauma, and it may not necessarily be the thing, right? It may be fragments of the thing. So it may be thought patterns, core beliefs, which I'll talk about a little bit. It may be, again, those things that we tell ourselves that we can and can't do, the limitations that we put on ourselves. It could even just be as simple as our self-worth and our inability to see the worth and value that we hold. And because of that, that in itself becomes a barrier for us to be well. Okay, so that's just a quick overview, but I'm going to jump into the 6 ways that you may see barriers in your life regarding your mental health. And then again, y'all can talk back to me. Feel free to ask me any questions. If you need me to repeat anything, I'll be more than happy to. Or if something is unclear and you want some type of clarity about it, okay? So jumping into the common wellness barriers. Number 1, not knowing where to start, right? And that's so simple, but it can become a very huge and impactful barrier, something that really keeps you from moving forward. Not knowing where to start, a level of confusion, right? So that's surrounding lack of knowledge, lack of emotional skills, not having the language to understand, regulate, and communicate your emotions, right? It can look in so many different ways, but sometimes just not having the knowledge and not even having the capacity to seek out that knowledge can be a barrier, right? So under not knowing where to start, first one is lack of knowledge, fear of starting. It's intimidating, right? Sometimes it's when you're thinking about making these huge changes to your life, whether it be how you think or your habits, or just shifting, your lifestyle. And it may be big shifts or small shifts, but there may be fear associated with that. So that creates a fear of not knowing where to start, and so it keeps you stagnant. Hi, James, welcome in. Lack of self-awareness. So just being oblivious to what's happening around you and what's happening inside of you, what's going on in your mind and in your heart, right? Mental exhaustion. Sometimes we're just mentally exhausted to the point where we create this confusion within ourselves to a point where we just like, okay, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. And I just want relief rather than actually doing the active work to get well, right? And sometimes the relief, the quick relief, which we'll talk about in a little bit, the quick relief, the quick dopamine hits, the quick solves end up holding us back from true healing and true processing of emotions. Okay. Thank you, Ben. Welcome in. Thank you, RW. Welcome in. You too, James. Thank you. Okay, so yes, mental exhaustion. Another area under not knowing where to start is consuming too much content. Okay, so sometimes when we are trying to go through the process of self help, we consume a lot of content and we feel like that content is the wellness, right? And the thing about it is if you aren't doing anything with the content or with the information that you're using, that can deceive us into thinking that we're doing something when we're not necessarily doing something. Now, by any means, still consume my content, okay? I'm not saying don't watch me or turn me off. I'm just saying sometimes when we consume a lot of it, it gives us that falsehood of, oh, I'm getting better because I'm consuming all of these things. But it's not until you take the action, and I'll give you some actions that you can take. It's not until you take the action, whether it be small or big, however you see it, where true change and evolution is going to begin to happen. Okay. And then what else? Not knowing where to start, perfectionism, procrastination, imposter syndrome, chronic acceptance, right? So all of those things can prevent you from moving forward. You want it to be so perfect, and if it's not perfect, then you feel like you can't do it. Procrastinating, so just kind of pushing it off. The total opposite, and just saying, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it at the right time, right? Which is still kind of perfectionism, but also procrastination. Imposter syndrome kind of goes back to the intimidation, right? Feeling like it's intimidating to move forward in wellness. And then chronic acceptance is really just taking on your trauma and accepting it and saying, this is who I am and I'm not going to change. And you just take it or leave it. And sometimes we confuse our self-identity with our trauma, and it kind of conflicts and gets in the way of our wellness and our true evolution of wellness. So those are just a quick rundown of some other areas of like not knowing where to start. Those things can stop you from knowing where to start. Okay. And then lastly, just complex situations and concerns. Like as humans, we're just layered people. We're layered individuals, and thinking about addressing mental concerns may seem too difficult. It just may seem too hard. And it's like, I'd rather just keep going the way things are going. Like it's easier just to navigate life as I have been. And with that, there comes a sense of hopelessness. There comes a sense of just looking at the situation and not being able to see an out. Again, it goes back to that chronic acceptance, right? Okay, my trauma is my trauma, and I'm just going to accept it as that. And the evidence of my trauma is who I am, and that's not going to change, right? So those can be very huge barriers, because that doesn't even put you in a state of awareness. That puts you even before awareness. All right. So I threw a lot at y'all with that, but I wanted to make sure that I was detailed in explaining what not knowing where to start can look like, because not knowing where to start is very surfacey. There's a whole lot that can be underneath that could be the reason why you feel like you don't know where to start. Okay. So not knowing where to start doesn't mean you're unmotivated. It often means you're overwhelmed and need gentleness and not pressure. Okay. When you feel that feeling of, oh, I don't know what to do, I don't know where to start, it's a sense of overwhelm. It's a sense of overwhelm in some space. And it could be in one space, it could be in all spaces, but that's really what that state is, okay? All right, so that's it on number one. Number two, inability to be honest. I'm going to step on y'all toes a little bit at this one, so I'm sorry ahead of time. The inability to be honest is basically pretending you're okay when you know that you're overwhelmed. Pretending that everything pretending that everything is, there's nothing really you can do to change. And that putting on that happy face, right? Putting on that mask of, I'm okay. and ignoring all the stuff underneath, right? It's just like, just putting makeup on just really, damaged skin, and even though the makeup maybe look pretty on the outside, underneath it's just, a whole bunch of discoloration. It's just a whole bunch of stuff that's just happening. And having to come home after work or after your day and having to wipe all the makeup off all the time, every time, and allow your true self to show up, that in itself is exhausting, which keeps you from moving forward. So pretending you're okay when you're overwhelmed, staying in unhealthy relationships and situations, ignoring burnout or signs of distress, avoiding or dismissing difficult decisions or emotions like the decision fatigue. We talked about that before. Performing strength instead of experiencing healing, right? So sometimes we perform being strong rather than being strong, right? And because of that, that's exhausting. And it's also a sense of dishonesty within yourself, right? When you're performing and you feel like you have to perform all of the time, that gets your state of mind into kind of like an autopilot mode, right? Because you have to sometimes not necessarily turn off, but sometimes in a sense, turn off self, turn off emotions, turn off feelings in order to perform and to be able to sustain the lifestyle that you have. And because of that, you avoid being honest with yourself in how you're feeling and what needs to be done and what changes that need to be made. So denial can feel protective, but it often delays peace. And what we avoid emotionally often shows up physically and behaviorally, okay? Whenever something is being suppressed or avoided internally, it's going to bleed in other areas. And so if you're having these behavioral issues or if you're having physical issues that are unexplainable, many times looking internally is the first step, because sometimes we'll think, oh, I may have this disease. We're Googling stuff. We're doing all these things. And it's simply, you need a break. You need rest. You need, restoration. And you don't have the space to do that. Okay. That was number 2. So inability to be honest with self. Number 3, defaulting to temporary solutions. I'm going to step on y'all toes again. So I'm sorry. I'm gonna step on your toes again. So defaulting to temporary solutions can be a huge hindrance, a huge barrier to emotional wellness, right? So temporary solutions feel easier in the moment, but then in turn cause more harm, either intentionally or unintentionally. I'll say that again. Temporary solutions feel easier in the moment, but then in turn cause more harm, either intentionally or unintentionally. All right. And because it's worked in certain situations, we feel like, okay, that's what I need to do, when that may not necessarily be the answer. Okay. So that could look like entertaining the wrong relationships, sitting in distractions, so reward-seeking behavior, whether it be like emotional eating or scrolling, resulting to substances or building unhealthy habits, venting without processing or complaining. That's a huge one, because a lot of times when we spend a lot of time complaining or we spend a lot of time venting, that keeps the trauma cycle going, right? And it keeps those feelings and emotions at the surface instead of actually processing the emotions. And sometimes we confuse venting and complaining with processing, and that may not necessarily be the case, okay? So venting without processing, causing harm to others as a release. So the whole concept of hurt people, this is where that's coming from, right? That's a temporary solution. Complete emotional shutdown or withdrawal. So disassociation, numbness. We suppress rather than process our emotions, and that builds up, right? Compartmentalizing, putting it off on the side and just leaving it in that compartment. Compartmentalizing is helpful. I've said this before, but sometimes we never go back to the compartment. So we compartmentalize and then we just leave it there and it just gets dusty and we never go back and clean it off and deal with it. And then it just still kind of collects and compounds dust until everything is dusty. It just starts to bleed on everything else. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Thank you, RW. Okay. So yeah, complete emotional shutdown and withdrawal. And then lastly, commercialized self-care. Yeah, I'm gonna go there, y'all. I'm gonna go there. Commercialized self-care. So sometimes we just throw a spa day on it. We throw a vacation on it. We throw a retreat, or we buy new wellness products. We buy a new outfit. Uh, but oftentimes when you're doing that, and not to say that stuff doesn't help, right? I feel like commercialized self-care is maintainers. Like it maintains, it doesn't initiate wellness or healing, right? It's something that is put in place to maintain your healing, but it's not going to initiate your healing. A spa day is not going to heal you, okay? A retreat is not going to heal you. Some of the wellness products, if you just buying a face mask, that's not going to heal your mental space, right? It helps to maintain your mental space, but it's not going to initiate healing. So sometimes we start throwing this commercialized version of self-care onto ourselves and thinking that's doing the work, and it's not doing the work. It's just basically prolonging the work if you're not doing that with the actual cognitive work. Okay. Because oftentimes you're doing this commercialized self-care and then returning right back to burnout, returning right back to the condition that you left by doing these different self-care things, right? So it then turns into performance. It turns into it being performative versus it actually making an impact. Okay. So that was number 3, defaulting to temporary solutions. So number 1 was not knowing where to start. Number 2 was inability to be honest. Number 3, defaulting to temporary solutions. Number 4, unable to set boundaries in environmental stressors. I think these all are stepping on your toes, but I hope it helps y'all. Know that Debbie's going to be real honest with y'all about this stuff, right? So number 4 is unable to set boundaries in environmental stressors, all right? So the first thing that comes up when it comes to environmental stressors is financial strain, right? Living paycheck to paycheck, job loss or unemployment, underemployment, debt anxiety, pressure to provide for others, inability to afford therapy, which is a huge one, unable to rest because you have the financial burdens, or not having access to wellness resources. And we allow the financial burden to stop us from pursuing wellness for whatever reason. There's a lot that can go into that, right? But wellness and healing doesn't have to be expensive. It just doesn't. There's so much support that you can find outside of those paid options. Now, granted, therapy is great, right? Therapy can definitely help, but you may not have access to it, or you may not have the funds for it. Now, if you have insurance, you may have access to therapy and not realize it. So if you do have health insurance, I would double check with your provider to see if you have access to, benefits for therapy and what that actually looks like, because all of the insurance providers provide it differently. But if you don't have access to that and you're trying to find ways of healing, there's so many different avenues that you could go, whether it be just starting with journaling, finding people on, of course, like here on social media, and people that have the credentials, right, that can help you with those different areas. But it doesn't have to cost a lot, right? There's so many things that you can do on your own that doesn't require for you to spend a lot of money. Another barrier when it comes to environmental is saying yes Saying yes when you don't have the capacity, y'all. When it comes to these boundaries and environmental stressors, setting boundaries is the biggest part of our mental distress. Um, let's see. Is it Oakley Bennett? I have 5 minutes. Help you in what way? I'm afraid to ask that question because I don't know if you're a bot or not. But help you in what way? Okay, so unable to set boundaries and environmental stressors. So we talked about financial strain, saying yes when you don't have the capacity, putting energy in minor details. We put energy in the wrong things. And that's something that we have to put boundaries up in order to ensure that we're not doing that. We're putting a lot of energy into the wrong areas, into the wrong people. We're putting a lot of energy into time wasted. So the energy and time impact our mental health the most, right? And that comes from false responsibility. Sometimes we find ourselves responsible for things that we're not technically responsible for, and we put a lot of energy and time into those things, and then we end up getting burned out quickly. Oh, awesome. You found one, Mark? Great, great. I'm so glad that you found someone. That's amazing. And all of the stuff that we talk about, if there's anything that you have difficulty like navigating, or something that you really want to take on, take it into therapy, and talk to them about it. And that's for anybody. Like if there's anything that we talk about on these lives, and you're like, I want to address this, but I don't know how to. I'm struggling with it, and you have a therapist, take it into them. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to work through it with you. Okay, so unable to set boundaries and environmental stressors. We said financial strain, pressure to provide for others, and the inability to, afford therapy, services. Saying yes when you don't have the capacity, putting energy into minor details. Family expectations. Sometimes we're having a hard time with setting boundaries there. Community and societal stress, chaotic home environments. Maybe work is chaotic and home is in chaotic. So there is no relief, right? And because of that, we're having a hard time setting boundaries in several different areas. And so that's just a continued cycle of chaos. And that's not the best place to be in. Toxic workplaces, lack of privacy, that's kind of what I was talking about, lack of privacy or a safe space, and then lack of support. Feeling alone in your struggles or not having safe people to share with can be a barrier or can seem like a barrier, right? So those are all boundaries, but I'm sure that boundaries look different in your every person's situation, but really take the time to think about where in my life do I lack boundaries, whether it be boundaries within myself or boundaries that I need to set with other people. Okay, that was number 4. Number 5, so stigma or cultural silence or just cultural issues, right? So that can look very different depending, of course, where you are, right? I know we have people that are in Europe, I feel like, and then Mark is from Belize, so I'm pretty sure it changes and alters based off of your particular culture, but the fears that come up with culture is a big one, right? Depending on, like, for example, the fear of appearing weak, right? Hustle culture. That's a huge thing in the US where everybody's expected to just hustle and to work hard. And if you work really, really hard, even at the detriment of your own self, then you'll be successful, right? So fear of appearing weak, fear of, not looking or appearing strong, the high functioning depression, right? Sometimes being high functioning works. So it kind of just is deceptive and helping you think that you're doing well when you're not, right? Identity confusion. Sometimes, and that's not just thinking about, like gender and all of that. I'm not talking just about that. I'm talking more so of within yourself, not understanding what you value and who you are as a person. If someone was to ask you, who are you? Can you answer that question? And a lot of times when you're not able to answer that question, that creates a lot of internal conflict to the point where you're unable to take action. You're unable to go into certain directions, especially the direction of wellness, when you don't have an idea of who you are and what you want. So, not having an understanding of your values, not having an understanding of your belief systems, not having an understanding of your own personal value and worth, and being attached to things, right? Being attached to titles, to money, being attached to your past self. So maybe you're not as happy as you would like to be, but there was a time in your life where you were happy and you want to get back there. But getting back there may not even be helpful for you right now. We all as individuals, we change and evolve. And sometimes we look back at the prior and say, oh, I just want to go back there. But that just may not be possible. It may be you developing and establishing and reinventing who you are now. And so that process hurts. So we get attached to the previous self and we sit in the fantasy of what I used to be versus who I am today, right? I know that was loaded, but I hope that was helpful in understanding what can be happening and why you may be having difficulty moving forward in wellness. When it comes to self-worth, you may not feel worthy of wellness. You may not feel worthy of being well. And because of that feeling or emotions, and that may be a conscious feeling or an unconscious feeling, but you having that feeling is preventing you from wellness because you don't feel like you deserve it. And everybody deserves wellness. Everyone, no matter, no matter what happened or no matter what the past may have looked like, if you're at a place where you're evolving and wanting to be better and wanting to do better, you deserve wellness. So that's where when I talk about identity confusion, that's what I mean. Okay. Is it Bawana? I hope I'm saying that right. Hello, welcome in. Okay, so stigma of cultural silence, identity confusion, fear of appearing weak, stress and pressure of being a part of a marginalized community. We all know if you're in a marginalized community, you have that additional stress and pressure. Spiritually bypassing. So, sometimes we think of religion in a certain way and we feel like we don't have the capacity to be well because of whatever we may feel about the religion that we practice. So that could be a barrier. Generational and survival patterns, so thought patterns, core beliefs, conditioning. So what did you learn about wellness as a child? How were you raised? How were you conditioned? What verbal or nonverbal conditioning did you do? Because as a child, you don't always just listen to what was said to you, but also what you experienced, what you witnessed. So did your mom work 5 jobs, right? And that's what in your psyche, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, well then I need to work 5 jobs to be successful, right? So it's not just when thinking about your conditioning, don't just think about what people have said to you or what you were verbally taught, but also what you were non-verbally taught. How did your caregiver show up in wellness? Were they well? Were they in a state of well-being or were they not, right? And how did that look throughout your life? And how does that show up in your life now, right? The things that you tell yourself that you should be doing. Well, where did those things come from? Oh, I should be working 2 jobs, or I should, be able to do this thing now, or I should be well now. And because I'm not, there's no need of me trying, right? There's so many different shoulds that may show up in your life, but that's where the generational survival patterns come from. Other stigmas and cultural places, family expectations, age expectations, that's another one. Oh, I'm in my 40s. I should know how to be well, right? That's another should, right? So because I'm in my 60s and I'm not well, like what, something must be wrong with me. So this is just going to be the way that I am, and I'm not going to change, and I'm just going to sit in my depression, and I'm just going to stay here, right? So just understanding that there's so many things that we could be telling ourselves, not realizing it. Age expectations is a huge one, right? Even when it comes to gender expectations with women and in age. Hey, I'm 42 and I haven't had a child yet. I want to have children. It's kind of lost for me. Now I sit in that depression, right? And that affects my mental wellness, right? So thinking about all those things. Make sure I'm not missing anything. All of the stigmas that you put on yourself or that others put on you is really where you want to put a pin in this when it comes to stigmas and cultural expectations. How does that prevent you from being well? All of those stigmas that we just talked about: family, age, gender, race, sexuality, identity, all of the things that you consider yourself to be, right? How do those things prevent you from being well? Based off of those things, what are you telling yourself? For men, it's men don't cry, right? Men have to be strong, right? Pull up your bootstraps and just keep going, right? Men don't talk about their emotions. Men aren't vulnerable. Like all of those things, right? It's not just a woman thing, This is everybody. So what are those stigmas that keep coming up for you that prevent you from being well? That's what you want to think about, okay? Also, lastly, and this is a huge one, the deception of comparison and external validation, all right? That's a huge deception. And because we spend a lot of time, let's talk about time and energy, where we put our time and energy, a lot of times we put that time and energy into comparison and into external validation. And when I'm not getting external validation, and when the comparisons is off and I feel like I'm inferior to someone else, now my mental health is all out of whack, right? We're measuring our journey against others, and because everybody has a different book and a different story and a different narration, it's a falsehood. Like, you don't know where they are in their story. They could be, I've said this before, they could be in chapter 7 and you on chapter 3, and you comparing chapter 3 to chapter 7. In chapter 7, the story is a little bit more established, there's a little bit more work put in, there's character development, there's all of these things, and you're comparing that to chapter 3 where we're just trying to get an understanding of what the book is about. So just really thinking about, like, okay, comparison, the only comparison you should be doing is the comparison to yourself. Am I better than I was yesterday? That's the only comparison that you should be doing. Other than that, everything else is doesn't matter. Okay? Because what people put on social media, and not even on social media, but just how people present in person and in public, is only a fraction of who they are. And a lot of times we're looking for comparison and validation with that fraction with our whole selves, and it's deceptive. I'm sorry, I'll get off my soapbox. That was number 5, stigma and cultural expectations. And lastly, number 6, lack of time and overcommitment. Oh, sorry, I had a typo and it's bothering me. Lack of time and overcommitment. So overloaded schedules with little recovery time. The biggest part of that is recovery time. We load our schedules, and I say that as somebody, I'll tap my own hands. I say that as somebody that does that, right? Sometimes I may overload my schedule. I have a low sense of time blindness. I think that's what it's called. I think that would be like the clinical term of time blindness, where I think I can do all of these things in this one day, but I neglected to give myself a break. You can't go for 12, 13, 14, 15 hours without trying to find some sense of break or recovery, right? We all need recovery. Even when you think about exercising, they tell you that you exercise these different things on different days, and then you have a recovery day, and then you go back to it. It's the same with your mental space, right? You do all of these things throughout the week, and then you have a recovery day. You have to recover. And that's not just a physical thing, it's also a mental and emotional thing. And if you are able to build in a recovery time within your week versus it just being a vacation that you take every 6 months, that can make all of the difference when it comes to your mental well-being. So yeah, overloaded schedules with little recovery time, constant busyness and just being spread thin, chronic multitasking and normalizing the multitasking. So normalizing the busyness, normalizing all of this can create a sense of depletion and burnout when it comes into your mental space. But normalizing chronic multitasking is a part of that high functioning depression that I talked about before. Sometimes we distract ourselves with being busy, and a lot of times we ain't even productive. We just busy. Just because you're busy doesn't mean you're productive, right? So yeah, chronic multitasking and normalizing it. Caregiver responsibilities. So of course, if you have children, you have parents, you have community that you're responsible for. If you have a spouse that you're responsible for, all of the things, right? Feeling guilty for resting. That's a cognitive thing. If you're resting, if you take the time to get some additional rest and you feel bad about it, that's something that you want to address, because you shouldn't, right? There shouldn't be a moment where you're feeling bad about resting. Now, is there a sense of laziness that may happen? Yes. There is a point where resting becomes, okay, girl, get up. Get it together. But if you can't rest at all and it's chronic to where it's like anytime you sit down and take a breather, you're like, oh, I need to do this, or I should be doing this, or there's a whole lot that goes in there. Kaden, yes, I do. I have two. Okay, so feeling guilty for resting. What else? No space for reflection or emotional regulation. And then lack of sleep, chronic exhaustion. All right. Our sleep habits are a big issue for a lot of us. If you were to get more rest, this is usually a good start. So just understanding that the lack of sleep, it could be the first thing that you can do, right? That's the first thing you can address. Because if you're not sleeping, if you're not getting your rest, if you're struggling with insomnia, or if you're having like other, things surrounding that, that's one thing, right? That may be something that's physical, that may be something that's medical. But if you just simply is just up scrolling, if you just simply like just up and about, okay, that's something different. Being very intentional with how you're resting is important, okay? Wellness is not found in extra time. It is created through intentional moments within the time you already have. This isn't about you just changing your complete life around, right? It's not about you completely altering your lifestyle, because that may not be realistic. It's about thinking about how your life is now and how can I intertwine wellness into it? How can I build wellness into my current life, right? Now, if you're automatically going back to, I don't have the time, I don't have, the finances, I don't have all of these things, I want you to really think about ways that you can alter that and ways that you can combat that or reframe that. What free things can I do that is considered wellness, right? I'm not talking about the commercial self-care. I'm not talking about you got to go buy a spa day, you got to go buy a massage. I'm talking about taking a break. I'm talking about hydrating yourself. I'm talking about getting sleep. I'm talking about giving yourself breaks throughout the day. I'm talking about journaling, right? Getting your thoughts out on paper so that way it's not swirling in here, right? I'm talking about, if you can, getting therapy or getting some support with wellness in that way, right? Um, it doesn't have to cost money, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It doesn't take, you can find a 10-15 minute break for you to do some breath work, or to listen to some music, or to take a walk, or, there's so many different things that you can do that's free, that's not a lot of time, that you can build into your schedule tomorrow, right? So it's just a matter of really thinking of what that would look like. Intentionally placing in your current lifestyle and making it easy for you to do. A lot of times it's hard for us to build wellness into our lifestyle because we make it too hard. You ain't gonna get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to work out. You know that. So don't put that in your schedule. It could just be waking up an extra 15 minutes, before work, and doing a meditation, or doing a prayer, or writing in a gratitude journal, or even just, I know we talked about the habits. We have the habits live, where you set things up next to things that you already do. So if you're brushing your teeth every morning, maybe sitting and putting an affirmation sticky note there, and as you're brushing your teeth, just reciting the affirmation to yourself. There's so many different little things that you can do to build into your routine that is more restoring than doing a whole spa day, or getting a massage, or going on a retreat, because that may not be accessible to you, right? So when thinking about wellness, it's not about just integrating it into your life, but making it easy. Make it easy for you to do it. Don't make it too hard. Don't overexert yourself. All right. So where we at? I did a lot of time already. So that was number 6. So we finished those. So basically the top 6 barriers that I came up with was not knowing where to start, inability to be honest, defaulting to temporary solutions, unable to set boundaries in environmental stressors, stigma and cultural expectations, and then lack of time and overcommitment. So you're probably like, Debbie, how do I make sense of all this? You said a lot, girl. It's been 4 to 6 minutes. How do I make sense of this, right? How can I begin to eliminate some of the barriers that I have? I'm glad you asked. Here's a few things, okay? Start with honest awareness. That's it. Start there. Just start with being honest with yourself and more aware of yourself, right? Taking notice of the things that is happening on a day-to-day basis and where the barriers are showing up for you, okay? The best way to overcome barriers is to have an understanding of what you're experiencing, and having a true, honest understanding of what you're experiencing. Don't lie to yourself. Stop lying to yourself. I had this open for like 10 minutes. Having a true and honest understanding of what you're experiencing. What's stopping you from being well? That's a question. That's a journaling question you can do tonight if you want to start somewhere, right? What's stopping you from being well? And just start with the awareness of it. Don't worry about performing anything. Don't worry about changing anything if that's not where you're at right now, okay? Just start with the honest awareness. If you got to go at a very slow pace, go at that pace. This is just you, okay? Identify the barriers and mark them as what is in your control and what is outside of your control, okay? I'll say that again. Once you become aware of the barriers, mark them as what's in your control and what's outside of your control, right? You can do this in many different ways. You do a T on your page, and one side you put what's in control, on the other side you put what's out of your control. You can also do it with a circle. Draw a circle. In the middle, you put what's in your control. On the outside of the circle, put what's outside of your control. However you want to do it. If you want to do it, as a diagram, whatever. But identify the barriers and mark them as in your control and outside of your control. Start with the most obvious ones and then work your way to the not so obvious ones, right? And usually the not so obvious ones are going to be under or kind of like be masked by the obvious ones, right? So if your first barrier you thought of was I don't know where to start, right? But then under that, it may be I'm fearful, I'm afraid of it, right? So just knowing that they may all be interconnected, but make sure to separate them based off of what you can control and what you cannot control. Questions you can ask yourself: what has been the biggest invisible weight you've been carrying? What do you push through instead of pausing to feel? Where in your life are you surviving instead of living? I'll say that again. What has been the biggest invisible weight you've been carrying? What do you push through instead of pausing to feel? And then where in your life are you surviving instead of living? So when you're looking at the items that you're in control, right? What is one small supportive action you can take to begin removing this barrier? You may not be able to remove it completely, or you may be able to. It just kind of depends on what the barrier is. But start thinking about actions you can take and journaling them however you want to. In small, it ain't got to be nothing crazy, y'all. Don't be thinking like, oh, I got to make everything perfect tomorrow. What is one small supportive action you could take to begin removing that barrier? The barriers that are outside of your control, what do I need to accept about this barrier? Okay? Is this a barrier where I can remove myself from the equation? Because sometimes the barriers that we think of is situational with other people. And the reason why it's a barrier is because those people have a big influence in your life, and you being able to back out of that situation or away from that relationship can start to remove the barrier, right? So is this a barrier that I can remove myself from the equation, right? Is this a barrier that I can change how I interact, right? Because sometimes it may not be, I can't change this person, but I can change how I interact with them. I can change the energy that I give them, right? I can change the time I spend with that person. I can change the time I spend in that environment, right? Does it mean I gotta get a new job? It may mean you gotta get a new job. I'm not saying you need to quit tomorrow, but I'm just saying there's so many different things that we think that we have no control over. When we do, we're just afraid to make those decisions, right? So I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. But yeah, so that's really where you want to start, right? Thinking about what barriers you're having or you're experiencing, what you can control about those barriers and what you cannot control, and then taking action on the things that you cannot control, and then accepting what you cannot, taking action on what you can control, and then accepting what you cannot control and making adjustments where you need to in those moments. Okay, you're welcome, Mark. So taking action. So it's about noticing, regulating, acknowledging, and then staying consistent in that. Okay, I'll say that again. Noticing, regulating, acknowledging, and then staying consistent in that acknowledgement. Because sometimes we acknowledge things and we become aware of those things, and we try to take action on it, and we do like 2 or 3 things, and then we get discouraged, and then we stop, right? So noticing, regulating, acknowledging, and consistency. Make sure, I think that's it, y'all. I hope this is helpful. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Oh, and I think this is just kind of going back to understanding that there may be some things that you just don't want to do, and that's why it's not happening. I think that's where I'm ending. Sometimes when it comes to wellness, you just don't want to do it. It's like, it's too hard. I'm frustrated. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. And we just got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you really, really want healing, and if you really want to be well, it's going to be some comfortable moments. Not everything is going to be sunshine and rainbows and Skittles. And that's just the way that it is. And if that's something that you have to accept, that's something that you have to process and really get a good understanding of it, then start there. Because without that understanding and acceptance, everything else is going to be hard. All right. I love Skittles too, Isaac. I do too. Even though they don't taste the same. I don't know. They did something. They did something to it. Same with the Reese's peanut butter cups. They did something to those Reese's, and they just don't. They don't just be hitting. They taste like chalk now, and I don't like that. But yeah. So I hope this is helpful, y'all. Y'all be blessed. Again, my name is Debbie. I am a certified mindfulness coach and a therapist intern. And this channel is all things mindful living. And that's what we talk about every Monday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. You will see me next Monday. After that, I'm on break because Debbie's birthday is coming and I need a break. Okay? So see, I'm building it into my lifestyle. All right. So you'll see me next Monday. I think we have one other topic. I can't recall what the topic was on the poll. I think that was like a grief topic, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll do that topic next Monday, and then I'll be on break for 2 weeks, and then we'll be back that second week of April. I think that's what it is. Yeah, I think it's the second week of April we'll be back. You will get other videos though. You'll get some meditations, and hopefully I'll be able to do another stretching video that I can post, but you definitely will get some more meditations in that time frame. But make sure to like this live. Make sure to share this live with anybody that you can think of that it's helpful for. And if you haven't subscribed, why not? Okay, you're taking too long. Just go ahead and click the button and go ahead and subscribe. So that way you can get all the notifications, and especially when we come back next week. But this live will be available, I would say, in probably like within the hour. You're welcome, Hiru. You all have a great rest of your night. Remember that, that your safe haven is within y'all. Remember that. And I will see you next Monday at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Be blessed. I love y'all, and God loves y'all too. Talk to you soon. Bye.